You know, it's the darndest thing. I was baking an apple pie just this morning the way my mama taught me, with cinnamon and a bit of nutmeg, and that one secret pinch of salt she said made all the difference. And I tell you what, the moment that scent filled the kitchen, it was like the years just slipped away. There I was, standing by the oven in my old cotton apron, and suddenly I wasn't 87 anymore. No, ma'am. I was 23 again, barefoot on the cold linoleum floor of that little house in Jackson, Mississippi, hummin' Patsy Cline and waitin' on Charles to walk through the door. Funny how a smell can do that to you. Bring back a whole life you thought you'd tucked away for good. And today, well, I don't know why, but something inside me stirred. Something I've kept buried for over half a century. Maybe it's the quiet of this house these days. Maybe it's watching my granddaughter fall in love and not knowing what's coming. Or maybe it's just time. You see, there's a story I've never really told anyone. Not the whole of it. Not the truth. People think I'm just the sweet old church lady who makes the best lemon bars in the county, and bless their hearts, maybe that's all they need to know. But life's got layers, sugar. Just like that pie crust I rolled out this morning. And mine's got a crack running clean through the middle of it. I remember the exact night it started, too. Summer of '61. Hot enough to melt the asphalt. Charles had just come back from one of his business trips, Baton Rouge, he said. He smelled like motel soap and aftershave. Kissed me on the cheek and said, "Miss me, Gracie?" I laughed and said, "Only when the sink leaks." We were always joking like that back then. Lord, we were happy, or at least I thought we were. But sometimes, when the house was real quiet and the children were asleep, I'd catch him staring off like he was somewhere else. And I felt it. I did. That tug in my gut a woman gets when something ain't right. But I pushed it down. That's how we did it in those days. We didn't stir the pot unless we had to. I suppose I've been carrying this story around in the folds of my memory, like a handkerchief pressed between old Bible pages. Neat, silent, almost holy. But lately I've been thinking, maybe it's time to take it out, give it a little air. Let someone hear it before it turns to dust. It's not a happy tale. Not exactly. But it's mine. And I reckon if you're sitting here with me, listening, maybe you've carried a story or two of your own. Maybe we can share the quiet together. I'll tell you something, sugar. What I'm about to say, it ain't easy. But I've learned the hard way. Not all truths are allowed. Some come in whispers years later on a breeze that smells like apples and cinnamon. And when they do, well, you either turn your face away or you sit yourself down and you listen. So sit with me a while. This one's been sitting in my chest a long time. And I figure if I don't let it out now, I never will. Well now, before I tell you more about Charles and all that followed, I reckon it's only fair to take you back a little further. Back to where I first learned about life and love and all those big feelings you just can't put into words. I was born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi, a small town where everybody knew everybody's business, and the front porch was where you found your daily dose of gossip and sweet tea. The streets weren't paved with gold by any stretch, land sakes alive. We didn't have a pot to pee in most days. But the people, honey, they had hearts bigger than the Mississippi River itself. My mama, bless her soul, was the kind of woman who'd give you her last biscuit and never think twice. And my daddy? Well, he was a hard worker, calloused hands, kind eyes, the sort of man who never raised his voice but made sure you knew right from wrong. I was their youngest, a curious little thing with sun-kissed hair and a head full of dreams. I remember running barefoot through the fields in the summer, chasing fireflies till the stars came out to play, humming hymns my mama taught me before bedtime. Back in my day, life moved at a gentle pace. The sun rose, folks went to church, kids went to school, and in the evenings, families gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories and laughter. It was simple, but it was good. I was just a young girl then, full of hope and innocence. I believed that kindness was the most powerful thing a person could have, and that no matter what, people always came back to those they loved. My heart was as open as the sky above, and I dreamed of a life filled with love, children, and a home warm with laughter. I was no city slicker, no wild thing, just a girl who wanted to make the most out of what little she had. I used to think that if you worked hard, kept your faith, and treated folks right, everything would turn out all right. And for a while, it seemed like it might. I met Charles when I was just 17 at a church picnic down by the river. He was charming, with that gentle smile and those eyes that seemed to see right into your soul. He told me stories about places he'd been and promised me a future brighter than the southern sun. We courted slow and steady, just like folks did back then. No rush, no fuss, just two hearts learning to beat together. When I married him in '59, I felt like the luckiest girl in Mississippi. I had my man, my faith, and a hope so big I could hardly hold it all inside. But life, as I learned soon enough, doesn't always follow the plans you make in your head. Sometimes it throws you curveballs wrapped in sweet smiles and gentle words. Still, those early days before the whispers, before the secrets, they were as pure and true as a fresh morning dew. I held on to those memories tight, like a precious quilt sewn from patches of joy and innocence. And I carried with me the simple belief that love, kindness, and faith could see you through the darkest nights. That was who I was back then, a girl with open hands and an even more open heart. And if you listen close, you can almost hear the laughter of a young woman who thought the world was hers to take. You know, life has a funny way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. I remember it like it was yesterday, the day something shifted deep inside me, though I couldn't put my finger on why at the time. It started just like any other warm spring afternoon in Jackson. The sun was dancing through the leaves, birds were singing their sweet songs, and I was busy tidying the kitchen after lunch, humming a tune my mama used to sing. That's when he walked in, Charles, with that easy smile and his usual, "Miss me, Gracie?" But alongside him was someone I wasn't quite ready to meet. It was a letter tucked inside his coat pocket, the edges worn like it had been read more times than I could count. I spotted it the moment he hung his coat on the rack, that little envelope sticking out like a secret begging to be told. I remember my heart skipped a beat, faster than a hummingbird's wings, and I caught my breath. I didn't know why, but I felt that old familiar feeling, the one you get when your whole world's about to turn upside down, even if you don't quite understand it yet. It was like a whisper in the wind, a shadow in the sunlight. I wasn't just curious, I was almost afraid to know what was inside. That letter changed the rhythm of our days. Before that, everything had been simple, or at least as simple as life in a small town could be. I had my routine, the church on Sundays, baking for the socials, raising our children with all the love I had. But that envelope, it was like the first crack in a window you thought was solid. It hinted at a story I hadn't been told, a part of Charles's life that had been hidden away, just out of reach. I was young, yes, but I knew enough to sense that not all truths come wrapped in ribbons and bows. I held that letter in my hands, trembling, and wondered how many more secrets were tucked away in his pockets, his eyes, his smiles. You young folks wouldn't understand how much courage it takes to look someone in the eye when you're carrying a storm inside you. I didn't open that letter right away. No, I waited. I waited because sometimes knowing too soon can break a person. And I wasn't ready to be broken. But the very presence of that letter made me see Charles in a new light, like a puzzle with a missing piece. I thought back to the woman I was before I met him, a hopeful girl who believed love was simple, pure, and kind. And I wondered how that girl would have handled a secret like this. I can tell you this much. I didn't know it then, but that letter was the start of a long journey, a journey that tested every ounce of my faith and strength. It was the moment I realized life isn't always what it seems. And sometimes, the people we love hold parts of themselves so deep inside that even they don't know how to bring them out. That day, I felt a stirring deep in my soul, a mix of fear, hope, and a strange kind of determination. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew that whatever happened, my life was about to change forever. And in that moment, as I sat quietly with that letter in my hand, I made a silent promise to myself to hold on, to be strong, and to face whatever came with the grace I hoped I had inside me. Well, darlin', life ain't never been a smooth river for me, not once that secret got tucked under my skin. After I found that letter, after the quiet whisper of something not quite right settled in my bones, things started to change. And Lord have mercy, it wasn't just inside me, the whole world seemed to start shifting. You see, back then, people in Jackson liked their lives neat and tidy. They liked their families to look perfect on Sunday mornings in church pews, with no shadows hanging in the corners. And secrets? Oh, heavens no. Secrets were like a bad stain on a white tablecloth, something you tried to scrub away before anyone noticed. But here I was, with a weight on my chest heavier than the Mississippi heat in July. Charles kept his trips to Baton Rouge, saying they were business, but I knew better. I'd hear the whispered names from neighbors, little rumors passed like Sunday casseroles, never quite said loud, but always hanging there. And that made the house feel smaller, tighter. My own children looked to me for comfort, for answers I didn't have. I'd smile and tell them we make do with what we got, because Lord knows, that's what we did. But at night, when the world was still and the house creaked and settled, I'd feel the sting of loneliness like a splinter beneath my skin. I was angry, yes, furious even, but I swallowed it down deep where no one could see. Because how do you tell your children their daddy is a man with 2 families? How do you face the church when you're carrying a burden no one else can bear? And the shame, oh, the shame was like a cloak I couldn't take off. I felt like the whole town was watching, waiting for me to break. But I held my head high. I had to. My mama used to say, Grace, you're stronger than a bull in a barn. And so I kept going, even when the nights were long and the prayers felt like echoes in an empty room. I didn't have many allies. My sister, sweet girl that she was, told me to stand up for myself, but that meant opening a wound I wasn't sure I was ready to bleed from. My friends at church? They saw a happy couple, a perfect family. No one knew the battles I fought inside. The hardest part, darlin', was the silence, the pretending, the daily act of normal that felt more like a mask. I questioned myself every day. Was I just fooling myself? Was I weak for staying? Was I betraying my own heart? Those doubts piled up like storm clouds on the horizon, threatening to break. And yet, I found a strange sort of courage in that struggle, a stubborn flame that wouldn't be snuffed out. I wanted to scream, to shout from the rooftops, but I was a woman of my time, a woman who knew the price of a scandal. So I chose silence. I chose love in the way I knew how, steady, quiet, and unwavering. But that choice came with a cost. It built a wall between me and the man I once thought I knew. Between me and the world. Between me and myself. And every day I wondered how long I could keep it up. How long I could keep smiling through the ache. How long before the cracks showed. It wasn't easy, honey. No, it was the hardest thing I ever did. But sometimes, the hardest things are what shape us into who we are meant to be. Land sakes alive, I remember that day like it was yesterday, though part of me wishes I could forget it, and part of me knows I never will. It was the kind of morning where the sun rose slow, like it was afraid to start the day, and the air felt heavy, thick with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I was just in the kitchen, humming a little tune, when Charles came home earlier than usual. There was a different look in his eyes, not the warm, familiar smile I was used to, but something cold, distant, like a stranger had taken his place. I asked him how his trip was, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a worn envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to me like it was the heaviest thing in the world. My hands trembled as I took it, and the room seemed to shrink around me. I opened it slowly, trying to brace myself, but there it was, a photo of a woman I'd never met, holding a baby with eyes so much like my own children's. That was the moment the world stopped spinning. I swear, I could hear the clock in the hallway click once, and then silence. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst through my chest, but my legs went weak, and I had to hold on to the counter to keep from falling. All the years of quiet doubts, of whispered rumors and unanswered questions, came crashing down in a single breath. Charles looked at me, his face pale, and I could see the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing down on his shoulders. I asked him why he never told me, why he hid this part of his life from me and our children. But he didn't have words that could fix the hole that opened inside me. I lost more than just trust that day. I lost the man I thought I knew, the future I'd imagined, the home I believed was whole. And for a moment, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. It felt like my very soul had been laid bare, vulnerable and raw. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't cry right then. Not yet. I just stood there, shaking, trying to make sense of a love that was tangled in pain and betrayal. That night, I sat alone on the back porch, the crickets singing a mournful song, and I let the tears fall, soft, quiet, like rain on a window pane. I realized then that some truths don't heal, they hurt. But even in that hurt, I found a strange kind of strength. Because I had a choice to make. I could let this break me, or I could hold on and keep going for the sake of the family we built. And that's what I did. I swallowed my heartache, put on my Sunday best smile, and carried on. But the woman who walked back into that house after that day wasn't the same girl who married Charles all those years ago. She was wiser, harder, and a little more guarded. And though the clock started ticking again, I knew that moment would live in me forever. The daytime stood still, and I learned the true meaning of love and loss. Well, darling, after that storm came through, the house felt different, colder, quieter, like the heart of it had taken a step back and left me standing in the dark. For a long while, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The woman who had dreamed of a sweet life, filled with love and laughter, was gone, replaced by someone quieter, carrying a weight too heavy for her years. I'd sit by the window most days, watching the world move on without me, and wondering where all that hope had slipped away to. You know, when you've been knocked down so many times, it's hard to find the strength to stand back up again. I found myself questioning everything, my faith, my worth, even the very meaning of love. Lord have mercy, it was a lonely place to be. I stopped humming those old tunes and baking as much. The kitchen, once filled with warmth and the smell of fresh pie, felt empty, like a forgotten corner of the house. I'd fold laundry slowly, my hands moving on their own while my mind wandered somewhere far away. I was living, yes, but it wasn't the life I'd planned. It was a shadow of it, a quiet echo that followed me from room to room. My children noticed the change, of course. They'd ask why Mama was so quiet, why she didn't smile as much. And I'd tell them, sometimes, honey, grown folks carry burdens you can't see. I didn't want to burden them with the truth that their daddy's secrets had carved a hole in my heart. The church was still there, the pews still filled on Sunday, but I felt a little distant from it all. Faith, once my anchor, felt slippery like water through my fingers. I prayed, but the words sometimes felt hollow, like I was talking into the wind. I wasn't angry anymore, not loud enough to shout, but there was a deep sadness settled in me, a quiet ache that whispered in the stillness of the night. Sometimes I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. But I kept going. That was what my mama taught me. Keep your feet on the ground and your heart steady, even when the world tries to pull you under. I found small comforts in the routine, a letter from a granddaughter, the Sunday paper, the way the light hit the porch just right in the afternoon. They were like little lifelines, reminding me that life still held bits of beauty, even when it didn't feel fair. Over time, I learned that some wounds don't heal with a bandage or a kind word. They settle into your bones and become part of who you are. And that's all right, because even in that quiet, in that ache, there's a kind of peace. Not the kind you find in stories or prayers, but the kind that comes from surviving, from holding on when it feels like everything's fallen apart. So, yeah, the woman I was before all this, she's not here anymore. But the woman who remains, well, she's still standing. Maybe a little worn, maybe a little broken, but still here. Still watching, still breathing, still carrying that stubborn hope that one day, the pieces will feel a little more whole. And that, sugar, is something worth holding on to. You know, sometimes life has a way of surprising you when you've almost given up on expecting anything new. After all those long, quiet years of holding on and just getting by, I thought maybe my story had run its course, just a faded photo stuck in a dusty album. But then one day, something small happened that gave me a nudge, like a soft breeze through a closed window, reminding me that the air is still fresh out there. It was an ordinary morning, the kind you don't think much about. I was sitting on the porch, sipping sweet tea, when my neighbor, Miss Lottie, called over to me. She was fixing up her garden, looking all determined and cheerful. "Gracie," she said, "you ever think about joining the church quilting circle? We could use your help." Now, I hadn't sewn much since those heavy days when my hands moved without thinking, but there was something in her voice, a kindness, a warmth that felt like a gentle invitation back to life. So, I said yes. That little yes was the first step out of the silence. Quilting Circle became more than just stitching scraps of fabric together. It was like piecing together bits of myself I thought were lost. We talked, laughed, shared stories, real ones, not the kind you keep locked away. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of that old fire inside. I started to see that maybe, just maybe, there was room for hope again. Helping others, even in small ways, gave me a purpose beyond the pain. I began checking on Mrs. Jenkins down the street, bringing her cookies, listening to her stories about days gone by. I helped at the church bazaar, set up tables, and served sweet tea to the folks who came. Each little thing was a stitch in the quilt of my new life, a thread of light in the dark. And wouldn't you know it, that made all the difference. I found myself dreaming again, not the big dreams of a young girl, but simpler ones. Dreams of peace, of laughter around the kitchen table, of warm hugs from my grandchildren. I realized that life doesn't always give you a clean slate, but it does give you chances, sometimes just little ones, to start fresh. And that's what I clung to. That quiet hope that tomorrow might be kinder than today. My faith, which had felt so slippery and distant, found a new foothold in these moments of connection and kindness. I saw that love isn't just about grand gestures or perfect families. Sometimes it's just showing up. It's the steady hand on a neighbor's shoulder, the shared smile over a patchwork quilt, the willingness to try again even when your heart's been bruised. So here I am, sitting on this porch, ready to keep piecing my story together, one small stitch at a time. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I do know that I'm still here, still hopeful, still willin' to believe in the good. And that, darlin', is something worth holdin' onto. Land sakes alive, it took me a good long while to get here, to this place where I could finally say, enough. You see, carryin' a secret that heavy for so long, it shapes you. It's like draggin' a sack of stones behind you wherever you go. And believe me, sugar, I carried that sack close to my heart for more years than I care to count. But one day, sittin' in the quiet of my kitchen, with the sunlight pouring in through the window and the scent of jasmine on the breeze, I realized something important. I realized that holding on to the hurt wasn't just weighing me down, it was keeping me from breathing, from living. I thought about all those years I spent wondering, doubting, hiding pieces of myself away. And I knew then, with a quiet surety, that it was time to let go. Not because what happened was okay, no, Lord, no, but because I owed it to myself to be free. So I gathered up some of those old memories, the ones wrapped in pain and silence, and I set them down like a burden I'd carried too long. I took that letter, the one that started it all, and I folded it carefully, then placed it in the fire pit out back. As the flames danced and swallowed the paper, I felt a weight lift from my chest. That moment, darlin', was like taking a deep breath after holding it for years underwater. I made peace with the fact that some things can't be changed, but how I chose to live from here on out was mine to decide. I told myself, Grace, you've done all you can do. Now it's time to live for you. And live I did. I started letting myself smile more freely, laugh without worry, and open my heart again carefully, yes, but with hope. I reached out to my children and my grandchildren with honesty and love, sharing parts of my story that had once felt too painful to speak. And in doing so, I found healing not perfect, but real. It wasn't easy. Some days still brought tears, and sometimes the past knocked on my door when I least expected it. But I was stronger now. I had chosen to walk forward, not back, and that made all the difference. I've learned that forgiveness isn't just for the ones who hurt you, it's a gift you give yourself. So I forgave Charles, not because I forgot, but because I needed peace. I forgave the silence, the secrets, the years of quiet ache. And most of all, I forgave myself for staying and for loving in the way I did. This choice, this acceptance, changed everything. It gave me freedom. Freedom to love without fear, to cherish my family without shadows, and to live my days with grace and gratitude. So here I am now, holding that freedom close, ready to face whatever comes next with a heart unburdened and full of quiet strength. I chose to live, darlin'. No more pretendin', no more sorrow chained to my soul. Just life, sweet, messy, beautiful life, and I'm here for every minute of it. Well, sugar, after all these years of carrying my story like a patchwork quilt stitched with both joy and sorrow, I've come to understand something real important, something you don't learn in school or hear preached from the pulpit, but something you feel deep down in your bones. Life, I've found, ain't about waiting for the perfect moment or the story to unfold just the way you dreamed. It's about keeping on even when the path's rough and the skies are gray. I used to think that if I just held on, if I stayed quiet and faithful, then everything would turn out all right. That's how we did it in those days, after all. But the truth I carry now is a little different. I learned that some things don't get fixed with time. Some wounds stay tender, some secrets never fully told. And that's okay. Because it's not the perfect ending that makes a life worth living, it's how you walk through the storms and keep your heart open when you want to close it tight. I've come to see that love isn't just about happiness or fairy tales. Sometimes, love is a quiet strength, a stubborn hope that pushes you forward when you feel like giving up. It's holding steady when everything inside you is breaking loose. And honey, that's a kind of courage that doesn't get talked about enough. Maybe the biggest lesson I can share is that you don't have to wait for the world to be perfect before you start living. You don't have to wait for all the answers or for pain to disappear. Sometimes you just have to choose to rise, choose to forgive, choose to love yourself enough to keep going. I've carried a secret for most of my life that could have broken me, but instead, it shaped me. It made me kinder, stronger, and more patient with the messy, imperfect world around me. And if I can leave you with anything, it's this: don't wait for perfect light to find your way. Sometimes, the dimmest glow is enough to keep walking. Maybe it's time for you, too, to stop waiting on what might have been and start living with what is. Because life, with all its troubles and heartbreaks, is still a precious gift. And darling, you're stronger than you think. You just have to believe it, one day, one moment, one breath at a time. So as I sit here on this old porch, looking out at the world through eyes that have seen more than their share, I smile. Not because everything's perfect, but because I know the truth. That even in the hardest times, there's a beauty in holding on, a grace in moving forward, and a light that never goes out if you let it shine. That's the story I carry. That's the story I hope you carry too. Well now, I'm mighty glad you stayed with me all this way. There's something special about sharing a story that's been carried in your heart for so long, like finally opening a window and letting the fresh air in after a lifetime of holding your breath. I hope by now you see me not just as an old woman sitting on her porch, but as someone who's lived through love and loss, joy and sorrow, and come out the other side a little wiser, a little softer, but still standing. Now, before I let you go, there's a question I want to leave with you, one that's been rolling around in my mind for years, like a stone in my shoe. It's this: do you reckon true love really does come back? Does it find its way home, even after all the twists and turns, the secrets and the silence? Sometimes I wonder if the love I had with Charles was one of those kinds. Maybe, just maybe, he remembers in that quiet way only souls can know. I don't say it out loud much, but sometimes when the wind whispers through the trees at dusk, I swear I feel him near, like a soft shadow that never quite fades. This story I've told you, it's not just about a time long past. It's about today and tomorrow and the choices we all make to hold on or to let go. It's about the ways love shapes us, even when it doesn't look like the fairy tales we grew up with. It's about courage, the kind you don't see in movies, but the kind that lives in the quiet moments when you decide to forgive, to heal, and to keep on loving, no matter what. I want you to carry that with you, my dear. Not as a burden, but as a light, a reminder that every heart has its own story, and every story is worth telling. And maybe, just maybe, it's in the telling that we find the strength to live fully, with all our imperfections and all our grace. So, I'll leave you with this thought, gentle and true. What does love mean to you? Does it mean holding on, letting go, or maybe both? I don't have all the answers, but I do know one thing: love is a journey, not a destination. And it's a journey worth talking, no matter how winding the road. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me on this porch in your mind, and for letting me share a piece of my heart. Remember, darling, life's too short to carry regrets. Choose love, choose kindness, and choose to keep your heart open even when it feels like the hardest thing in the world. And if ever you find yourself wondering, just listen to the wind. Sometimes it's carrying a message from the past, from someone who never really left. And that's a comfort like no other. So, until we meet again, take care of yourself and don't forget, the sweetest love stories are the ones we live every day, in the little moments that don't always make the headlines, but make all the difference. God bless you, my dear. And thank you for being here.